Okay, recording is now started. Okay, welcome everybody. Tonight is the 9th of February, 2021. Robot Builders Night Virtual, hosted by Dallas Personal Robotics Group. My name is Carl Ott. I'm the current president of DPRG, and I try and shepherd us through some discussion that everybody enjoys one way or another. We're going to do something a little bit different tonight. What that means is that we're going to start off with some discussions we've been deferring for a couple of weeks. We've been so caught up in our weekly daily projects, and we had some presentations from local high school group in Dallas, Iron Rain. So tonight we're gonna do something different. So for the first, however long it makes sense, maybe half an hour, probably more like an hour, we're going to talk about this Telepresence Robot Api. This is a DPRG project that we started to talk about in January, and a few of us have started some offline discussions. So the idea was to try and focus on this for a little bit and just try and steer things, and then maybe, I don't know, depending on interest, maybe we need to have some more offline focused discussions. But this is just to bring everyone up to speed and get feedback on what has been noodling around in some individual minds so far. After that, I'd like to spend another probably half hour, maybe a little longer, and brainstorm questions for this coming Saturday. And welcome, Cream. So, yeah, Chris, this coming Saturday in our regular monthly meeting for DPRG, we have arranged basically what we're calling an expert builder panel. And let me see. There's a couple
I disclaim that remark.
Okay, so bottom line is whether the panelists want to be called experts or not, we're branding them as such. And the idea is to just have an open discussion. We want to focus in DPRG. We want to spend a lot of energy this year. There's a lot of energy amongst club members, at least, to maybe get back to building outdoor rovers, and hopefully to have a outdoor competition in our August meeting. So we've got those things penciled in. We thought, what better way to start off than to talk to a handful of the club members, and actually we have a guest member, hopefully too, Spark Fund Ambassador Jesse Rockman from Colorado. And the idea is to just, whatever the topics are, I put a handful of various things that might be of interest in the meetup invite, but basically we'll ask our 3 or 4 panelists to give just a 3 or 4 minute intro. They'll talk about their favorite rover, give its name, or a picture maybe a couple personal boasts, tell us what's unique about it. And then we'll have some moderator-led questions, and that'll be the bulk of the meeting, I presume. And then open Q&A, maybe also the bulk of the meeting. But anyhow, the idea of tonight was that rather than just have me or some other individual come up with what are the questions, was to let's allocate some time this builders night out, and let's see what kind of questions people would like to ask of the panel. Not to discuss answers. Tonight is just to come up with the questions, and then I can form them and group them, and we can moderate the session on this coming Friday. So that, I expect these 2 bullets will probably take us a couple hours, at least an hour and a half. And then after that, we can get into the usual roundtable discussion. And there was one person who joined for the first time last week, didn't get a chance to talk in the first hour like I had promised or we'd hoped. So I wanted to make sure that if we get to this and if he's here, we can start off with that guy. So with that in mind, any thoughts or comments before we dive in? Okay, so hearing none, let's bring everyone up to speed on this telepresence robot thing. So we were talking about different projects that things that might be where we might have a handful of different members from the club or even guests participate in, and this came up in our January planning meeting for DPRG, and we settled on this telepresence robot idea. And the idea is that it would be a kind of a robot that could have modules contributed by groups from around the world. And anyhow, that's kind of what we thought as a club goal this year might be interesting. And the basic concept sketches like this. So we know that prior to COVID, we would have mostly in-person meetings with DPRG, and those were pretty good. But we've noticed that with COVID and being forced to go online, that we've got a lot of interest from people who either weren't able to make the Tuesday meetings or even Saturday meetings, or just didn't find them interesting as much as these online discussions. So the idea is that once we clear COVID, wouldn't it be cool, since we're a bunch of robot builders, wouldn't it be cool if we could make a semi-autonomous robot that was a telepresence robot, so that guests and people who wanted to jump in on DPRG meetings from remotely could just sign into this robot and kind of control it and be there without being there. So the idea was that if it starts with a person somewhere outside of the physical meeting and a robot there present in the physical meeting, then we came up with this kind of a notional architecture. So basically, that there would be the participant would have like a control UI. They would use that to steer the robot around or give it commands to move. And then we would use open source off-the-shelf tools to project a video and a visual and to capture camera and microphone. So why reinvent streaming when we focus on robots? So the ideas was we could just take one of our one of the many platforms we have amongst the club, or we come up with here, strap a mobile phone to it, load Zoom or Meet or whatever, and what that lets us do is, as a project, we can focus on these bits here, right? We can focus on how would this person get into a browser or an app or whatever to control the thing. And then the robot itself would need some kind of radio interface, presumably Wi-Fi would be the baseline. And then comes the magic part in the middle, which is of an interest to a handful of us, where we would have some kind of server, but then we would need some kind of API facing the client and some kind of API facing the robot. So at a concept, that was kind of like the outline of the project. And then we identified in January a handful of people interested in different segments. And then we identified a couple of platforms. So the idea was that if we were really clever enough about how we drafted these UIs or these APIs and the UIs and the interfaces, if we were clever about that, then we could make it so that these parts in the middle could be relatively general purpose. And then with little adapter layers, you could control any one of these robots, if not a custom robot. So this is kind of like the outline of the club project. And then I think Doug has probably been most active down here on this part, and then I've been most active probably on this part. So all I had tonight was that Doug has a document we can look at, and I have a document we can look at. So
I have an update too.
And Doug has an update. So I've been babbling now for 10 minutes. I should shut up and let me just pause there and ask if anybody has any thoughts or comments or whatever before we just dig in.
Hey, I have a comment. Is this possible that I mean, I guess the way is there's a remote control, right? So is this possible we prototype something like one command or even a message sent from remote to the robot and get a response back, and but just have that go through.
Absolutely.
Right?
Why not?
Yeah.
Right? Because if we keep it simple, then that should be straightforward to do, right? You could inject things in here via some method like Postman or something or whatever, and
right.
Absolutely. And
yeah, we can test the delay and all verify all these encrypted connection or whatever. But yeah, so I was thinking on that control UI client, I'm thinking, well, how about we just we just make something that doesn't really need a UI because it's just a simple command. We can always come back and implement a UI, but yeah, but that's kind of we can do it after this
I'm
prototype.
right there with you. I got a way to do it too. There's probably others.
Mm.
I think Chris, you were raising your finger there.
Yeah, so I think you explained the primary use case. I just want to make sure I understand it, and I want to make sure we spend enough time talking about really how this thing is gonna be used, right? And then I'm one of those guys who is remote, right? So I guess I would be potentially a guinea pig here for this, right? So I want to make sure we fully capture what I, as a remote user, really should be able to do, and sort of what sort of expectations I'm allowed to have, right? How quickly it responds, and that I think we should talk about that a little bit, because I think that will potentially drive a lot of the technical parts, right?
Yep.
And right now it's, again, I have a very vague idea of what the main use case is, and not really any idea about exactly what should I be able to do, right? I don't care yet how we get it done, and there's going to be, as usual, half a dozen different ways to do any one of these things, but I'm not yet clear about all the different things I will be able to do when this thing is done.
Perfect. I think that's an excellent segue. I made a note of it, and if we don't get to it in the next 10 or 15 minutes, make sure we get to it.
I would assume that there would be a base case and then you can expand upon it. The first thing would be that you would have some way to visual and talk back and forth like we're doing now effectively. And that would be set on that platform. That'd be the base platform. And then from there, you would have to have the platform be able to move. If it wanted to, well, actually, you might want to have a flag, like a hand raised up to say, hey, or something to say, hey, I'm here type thing. And then after that would be a movement, maybe if it wanted to go to somewhere or another.
Yeah. So I mean, just to illustrate, right? What I'm trying to find out. Well, should I picture being able to use like a little game console kind of remote here and drive this interactively? Or is it more closer to the Mars rover, where you press a button, you tell it to go somewhere, and maybe 10 minutes later, it does something, right? So that's where I think you gotta be very clear about the degree of interactivity that there's going to be.
Yep.
And that's why I would say that it has different levels based upon, distance, whatnot. So I would keep it the first level simple, effectively like what we're doing now, and then expand, which is why I like the idea of John, his comment about having, a simple command, see if we can get it across the board, and then go from there.
So I'm with you guys. The only thing I'd add to that is that I tend to think of this the way we've done planning on even bigger small projects in the office, and that would be that, like, if you can go overboard by trying to design everything up front, and then you never get anywhere, right? And then you can go really underboard by just doing these little one-off steps. But then if you get too many one-off steps, then without the kind of concept for the overall how they come together, then pretty soon you have a technical debt. You've got a big mess. So what I'd like to propose for this is that we exactly touch on the who would use it and what do they want to see, comments that Chris and John were raising, and what would be valuable, what would be useful, but that we start off then by implementing. Okay, what's the simplest way we can get started? To verify an Azure or Heroku or a DigitalOcean or something. But some kind of minimal implementation. So, in other words, to iterate from the bird's eye view down to the picayune, try this one command view, back to the bird's eye view, down to the picayune, and pretty soon, in the way I've seen it in the past, is very useful way. Pretty soon, you know that you've got like a roadmap identified. You know, okay, what are the 5 things that it takes to make it be useful? And then the next 10 things are bells and whistles. But that's where I think we are right now is that kind of level of discussion. So, okay, any other thoughts? Again, I keep babbling. Okay, well, let me, and then before I pull in, Doug, you were saying that you've got an update from last time.
Yes.
Okay.
I've done a couple of different things that I've been working on my section down there, and I've investigated the web RTC as a control mechanism. That would be a really great direct control mechanism, but it doesn't look like it would be easy to implement because it also requires a middle server that has HTTPS, and I just don't see we have one. And I think you can buy time on some, but I didn't think we wanted to.
Amazon.
You can do various cloud services, but I think the web RTC requires an actual server that's defined for you to talk to. Now, I didn't do an exhaustive search, and I'm far from an expert, but I kind of got down some rabbit holes that wouldn't get me anywhere, so I dropped it basically. I had talked in my paper, which Carl had responded to in his paper, about having a web server in the middle and he has that blocked out in his diagram there where it says the standard DPRG and that talks to the server and then it talks to the thing, the middle of his deal.
Yeah.
And that seems doable. And Debbie and I, or Donna rather, are working on that section down there. And she had an update. I was hoping she would be here. She was here last week, but we didn't quite get to it, unfortunately. But there's a list of some things that Carl had defined. And then there's another one that she found, and she was going to look and see how available those were to meet our needs. And I can't really talk to what she was going to say, but it's a possibility. And the other possibility I wanted to offer, because I have my website, is that I can put a server interface up, at least for testing purposes, that we can respond to HTTPS gets and puts and do standard CRUD level RESTful calls to see how that works. Now, that keeping all that on the side, because I was saying a lot before I let y'all jump in, is that I also investigated that little telepresence robot that I had ordered parts for and I was working toward. And the parts aren't all here yet, but I got to thinking, well, the main thing that it uses is Skype to do its back and forth communication and also to do its control. And unfortunately, Skype no longer lets those dial tone things through, which is what it was requiring to move the robot. So basically, I've got a bunch of parts that aren't going to be able to be put into a robot, at least not the one I intended, because Skype has changed how it transmits things. They've also duplicated their API, so we can't use their API. And that's about where I'm at, unless people have questions about those little things.
Have y'all been looking at IoT platforms?
I have not.
So Kareem, I've been giving this a bunch of thought because with between my own interest and then what Harold and his friends have exposed me to in the last few years with the Hackster meetup is there's just an absolute ton of those IoT hubs, IoT connection things. You've got Adafruit hosts Mqtt server for free. You've got microservices available ad nauseum, where if you can keep your service compartmentalized in a microserver instance, you don't pay anything. It just, if it fits in a couple pages of code, it's there when you need it, and when you're not using it, it's just there and you don't pay for it.
Yeah, I'm sorry, Carl. I hope you got a vaccination for whatever I exposed you to.
It's all good, Harold. I was chatting you up for all the really positive stuff you've filled my brain with.
No, but Carl, you're right. There's websites that you can host out there. There's Azure functions themselves. If you can somehow wrangle this in a function, you get 500,000 operations of that a month for free. I mean, there might be a way to get a lot of this stuff that you guys are that you need to have happen in like a third-party server hanging out somewhere. for almost free or little money at all, depending on what your resource level is. Really.
And that's something that thanks for bringing that up, Harold, because I've been thinking in the back of my brain. I didn't ask you, but I was thinking that I could get pretty far just on what you've shown me, and then I figured if we get stuck, we got some Microsoft MVPs we could lean on in this crowd. And
I'm more than happy to help in any of that stuff. You know I will.
And we also have, and that's where Steve Edwards had jumped on to this particular bucket too, because he works in Microsoft on the Azure Service Fabric level.
Oh,
so
we got extra juice then. We got extra juice.
Yeah, he's in the AD group for Microsoft, and I think he knows a different slice of the Azure and Microsoft infra than I think you and Harold and Ron do. But
it's vast. That landscape is vast in Azure.
Yeah, but I mean, but between y'all, I think I'm not too worried about the implementation at this point. For me, I think some of the most interesting questions are very much what Chris raised early on, and they get to okay, what do we really want this thing to do? And then the question that John and Jian raised, which is, okay, how are we going to step into it without trying to boil the ocean from day one? And I think Doug and I both took a stab at this, and what I was hoping to do was to maybe, at risk of taking too much time trying to read documents, what do you think, Doug? Does it make sense for you to spend a few moments just not reading every line, but skimming through your document, and I could skim through mine, and we could see what discussion that raises? You're muted, Doug.
Sorry. I can't really see my document on your screen, but I can kind of cover over. It had a couple of sections. One was there you go, the overall, how do we pull this off? And then I went into some discussion like I did a minute ago about the API between it. And it sounds like y'all have a better feel for that than I do. So I'm gonna stop talking about that for a little while and listen to what y'all have to say about that. But on the overall talk of the document, I was talking about there's two basic ways that you can control the robot over the internet. One, you can be viewing and hearing and sending direct commands, like Chris says, with his little joystick or with little keyboard commands and directly connected to the robot. Or two is to have some sort of middle server where the client sends up a command and the robot polls for commands, sort of like the Mars rover. And the Mars rover type activity, I would expect to be slower because you've got to wait for it to poll, but not so bad as the Mars rover because he's way out there in speed of light type things. We would still have to have some slower, less active things going on there with the Mars rover type, but I believe that's how we're going to end up going. And then there's a bunch of other talks about how to pull off the Mars rover thing that we don't need to talk about on my paper. The Restful API stuff.
Yeah, I saw what you did, Doug, as a nice sketch of some implementation options. Here's authentication, an approach. You just discussed the approach. Even down to the how might we encode data packets and encrypt things. But I wanted to share what I've done, though. I don't know if anyone else has read it except for those on the other list. So let me show you some of the things that I've tried to gather here, both from Doug and other thoughts. And by the way, both of these documents, the one Doug started and the one I've started, I put them in a shared folder, and I just put the link in the chat for this session. So if you wanted to download these in PDF form and have some thoughts, there they are. So basically, I tried to summarize and bound everything. So just to drive discussion, I listed some of the links up in here. And like there's a mailing list if you want to get into the whatever discussions we have. But the way I saw it, the way we've talked about it, I think that this API, we ought to have this API so that it can support multiple human users at the same time, each with unique ID and secured access, and that there could be multiple robot clients, each with unique ID and secured access, and that the API could support arbitrary platform driving configurations like differential, two-wheel, macadam wheels, quadrupeds, whatever. So it should be, in that way, you can imagine that if we could do some, if we could without too much work have something that this flexible, that could be a pretty nice framework to bolt things into. And then towards John, towards your idea of keeping it simple, getting started, and John, the idea was, well, at a minimum, it seems like you should be able to, the robot should have power and wheels and be able to move the platform around. So you can imagine if you've bolted a phone to it with Skype or Zoom, it should be able to drive it around, and a processor that's able to move the wheels and support an internet connection, like with Wi-Fi. And then, right, there's so many different driving configurations. I'd say let's not worry about that at the moment. Let's keep that. Let's worry about that later at the.
It shouldn't
robot.
even matter, maybe, right? I mean, again, it
Yeah.
comes back to the user experience. If I want
Right.
the thing to move from A to B, I don't care if it's got 4 wheels or 2.
You don't care if it floats on air.
Hmm.
You don't care if it uses a sail. Hoist the main jib, right? So maybe we should add that to here. Sail. Okay.
I don't think the main jib can block the camera view, though.
Well, that's okay.
Yes.
Little design constraint.
A little constraint.
It would be fun, though.
Carl,
And I don't want
I
to
have
learn how to tack.
That's
I have a question.
okay.
Why are we assuming it's gotta move on its own? Is that an important requirement?
Well,
Well,
what-
initially, it would not need to move. That was my point. Was I was saying, hey, let's start with it not moving, and then you can throw the platform to move. In other words, you can add to the platform.
Kevin, is that what you meant? What did you mean by that?
Well, I'm just questioning. If I'm able to move and constantly moving it around, I think I'm gonna drive everybody crazy because motors making distinct sound, etc. So most likely, I probably won't move while the meeting's going on. So is that an important thing, or can I just be able to view a few cameras at the same time? I think that's more important to me as a remote user than being able to move.
Nice comments.
Actually, an interesting thought. I would say you got the cost fit problem going on because it may be cheaper to have one platform that moves versus 8 platforms. And then you also have the problem of how are you going to switch from one platform to the next to the next. So you have design considerations there.
Something
would
that moves
suggest
is
start
just
with
more
one.
fun. That's how I would put it. It's just more fun to actually move something. So,
Oh, and that's why I would say that, yeah. But the key is not do bite-sized bits. Okay, I'll go with agile for a moment. I'll throw that word out. So, the key is let's have a platform. It doesn't necessarily need to move per se day one. That's why I was setting a flag so it could sort of like say, hey, I'm here. That would get back to the 1 bit, send a command, raise a flag type thing, or beep or whatever. And then that platform could be put on a wheel of some type, a sail or whatever for movement later. In other words, that would be sort of like phase 2.
That's.
I think one thing that's important to me as a remote user will be able to interact with people in the room. So things like being able to signify that I have a question or comment I want to make. It could be a hand going up, it could be a light, and also I want to be able to like clap to let people know I like something, or vice versa. If I could give a thumbs down, being able to socialize with the people, I think is more important than being able to move around.
I think that's an interesting use case. It's like the analogy of, okay, so if I was there in person, maybe I would walk up to someone, have a little sidebar conversation, right? Quietly, almost like whisper level, while and being able to do that remotely. I mean, that could be cool, right? Sort of be able to say, okay, now go walk up or drive up to this person, go close enough to this person so that you can quote unquote whisper to that person.
Cool.
One possibility for a whisper type thing is to text it back and forth on the keyboard, so it's not being spoken, but you can both read it.
And that's part of the thing here, right? Because if we're not careful, we can wind up just reinventing Zoom.
Right. Now, what Zoom doesn't have, I guess, is the ability to zoom, literally, right? Because
Yeah.
another use case is, right, someone's got some gadget sitting on the desk, right? And you know, we want to be able to drive this thing up close to that bench or desk, right? And then focus on that gadget and zoom in on that gadget, right? So that, I think, is part of the user experience that I would expect out of this. Not just a camera that I can pan around. I mean, the zoom part, I think, is quite important.
Cool.
So do you think you prefer like pan, tilt, and zoom versus being able to move the whole platform around?
I think both would be necessary, honestly.
Oh, okay.
Again, maybe, okay, so maybe the pan and, well, maybe you don't need the panning of the camera, but you're gonna need tilting, right? To kind of be able to look at exactly what you want to look at. So you can skip the panning part, but you need the tilting and the zooming, I think.
Yeah.
And that's why I wanted to say sort of back to my main point, which was have a platform that could sit on the moving platform. So I see it as sort of a two-part type thing. And there was a couple years back where I saw, and I forget the company name or whatever, but it was at it was at Fry's one time they had where basically they used the 20 by 20 angle iron type stuff and the reels, and they literally put a laptop on top of it type arrangement. So I'm thinking, and eventually we're going to get to that type of arrangement due to that fact.
So you think we should do the head in the box approach first there, John, or what?
Sort of, yeah, you could sort of define it that way. But
Yeah, we can have like Carl Headroom.
Carl, and then we've got Harold's head too with the moving eyes, right? So you got the avatar look going on.
Yeah. Place the head in the box on the table and it sees what it can see.
Cool. Yeah, well, this is neat. I hadn't thought of some of these, the raise hands and clapping and thumbs up down, but I think those are really interesting points. And the pan tilt. Okay, keep it coming. So, all right. So let me show you the next part. The next part I had in here was about communication, and I was thinking that you know, whatever the communications options are, they ought to be internet friendly, both for the user to the server API and from the API from the server to the robot. So it seemed like if we just look at the usuals, I didn't think of WebRTC necessarily, but you got HTTPS, MQTT and its secure cousin AMQP, sockets, maybe we can add UDP, WebRTC. So anyhow, all of these are open, right? And if we stick to standards like this, they'll handle the encryption for us, right? And there'll be plenty of libraries to lean on. We wouldn't have to go do that stuff from scratch. Or even like in the case of MQTT, we could just use the free Adafruit if that's a part of the design, because they have I think a free server you could use. Although, and then so this is where I thought it'd be interesting, because if we think about to Chris and Kevin's point of what's important and what do we want this thing to do, I think that's going to drive what's the content of this API. So it seems like no matter what, if we accept that there's multiple users and multiple robots, as opposed to just trying to do a point-to-point, one-off, point-to-point peer thing, if we have a many-to-many interaction, then we're going to need user CRUD, right, and robot CRUD, and log in, log out. And for example, Azure IoT Hub does this pretty nicely. They have built-in things, and there's other platforms where, with not too much effort, you can just leverage existing libraries and get some pretty cool capabilities. And communication management. So the API would have to be able to probably at the baseline, I guess, the server should be able to respond to posts and gets from the client side or the robot. And maybe if it's a hybrid thing where like control goes by HTTPS and then real-time stuff goes by sockets, maybe you need some part of the API that can open and close sockets, or some part of the API that can send alerts like socket closed unexpectedly or something went down. So, and maybe if we think this is so general purpose, maybe there's a way in there that one of the commands might be like from the client to the server, okay, report to me what features that you're supporting today, or from the to the robot, okay, what's the robot capable of? Can it drive autonomously? Does it have a turret or a pan toot zoom on a camera? I mean, so, and then other things might be like near real-time driving. So if you assume a really like low latency connection, maybe you just set a forward speed or a sideways speed or a heading, and as long as the network doesn't go down, you can just drive it with a really bad lag, like a half-second lag. Or maybe there's a
I don't think it will be half second, by the way. Again, the video part, I'm not. That's a different story. But yeah.
I would recommend against setting the robot going without being controlled. I would say let it go a certain distance, and then it's got to look for its next command. Otherwise, it could be bouncing against the wall over there because you lost your connection.
Exactly. So, and that could be part of the, I don't think I have that in here, but we could have a part of this in here that specifies expectations for the robot, right? Like it can protect itself from running downstairs.
Right. I mean, I think you labeled it earlier semi-autonomous, right? That's kind of the keyword here, because as a remote user, I should not be able to smash it into the wall, right? I should be able to direct it, in a particular way, but it's got to be able to sort of have almost like a drone, a fancy drone that has a built-in obstacle avoidance, right? It's not going to let you smash it into your house, and so that robot should be the same. It should have enough obstacle avoidance in there. It's just not going to let you get any closer to something than what its safety allows.
To make a note of this.
So that way, as a remote user, I mean, especially if I use it interactively and there's some lag, right? I mean, it's gonna be hard to control this thing, and but if I don't have to worry about smashing into stuff, I just go full throttle, in a particular direction, knowing that the robot's gonna, be able to some extent to avoid the obvious obstacles.
Yes. Cool.
Yeah, and with regard to all those platforms, I mean, I don't know, probably most of us have done differential drive, with one caster. Maybe we could add a second caster to, like maybe for the first platform, just to improve stability. But the other things are not many people have done that much. Quadruped, or that's nice to think about, but I'd say it'd be a lot more difficult to implement versus something we're all familiar with.
Yeah, but if I had to vote for one out of the driving mechanisms, I actually would vote for one that I'm not familiar with, and that happens to be on this list, the Mecanum, because for this particular application, I think being able to instantaneously go sideways, I think would be really beneficial, right? Just for this use case. I mean, and again, I don't have any experience with that, so someone would be doing sort of the lower levels of getting that well controlled. But I'm just thinking big picture here. I think Mecanum wheels, and also because of stability, right? I mean, we haven't talked about footprint of this thing, but regardless of what its footprint going to be, with 4 wheels, it's just going to be a bit more stable than two wheels and some caster deal, and I think the Mecanum stuff is just inherently more stable. Again, I don't have any hands-on experience, but that's the impression I get.
I'm not sure that you want to start opening up the interface part to the mechanics of the platform, because
I agree. I think we said earlier you wouldn't even necessarily need to care in the API what it is, but it's someone's going to have to
Yeah.
I
Well,
guess you
from
just
an API perspective, you're going to give it a heading and a velocity or a
Yes.
distance, or the mechanics of the platform here. And I guess I'm a little behind the curve here because I'm not sure whether we're talking about a virtual robot here or a mechanical robot that's controlled remotely.
Mechanical remotely. Physical.
In that case, then it doesn't matter what type of platform then you're controlling. You're going to say either give it a location, go to XY coordinate. You're going to tell it go this heading for this far. Those are the kind of commands that you're going to be looking at. You're not going to be looking at, well, I need the left-hand wheel and a differential drive to run this speed or that speed. That's going to have to be handled from the mechanical platform itself. So I don't know that complicating the API with what type of platform that it's working on is really pertinent from but I think getting back to one of the earlier questions, defining the use case, I mean, that's always the critical part of any project is what do you want to get out of this? What functionality and what use case do you want it to do? And that seems a little loose that, and again, I'm kind of out of the discussion here. Y'all have certainly talked about this a lot more than I'm familiar with, but it seems like that's kind of losing the use case and focusing on the core use and then expanding it like Carl was saying.
I think that's exactly what we're. I feel good. I feel like I'm hearing good progress tonight in the way that there's some elements of the use case that I really hadn't thought about yet. At least I don't know if anyone else has beyond those who brought it up. But these things here, I mean, they provide important items that would guide what has to be in the API. Whether any given robot implements them right at any one given time or not doesn't really matter if you're working on the API, right? You just want to make sure that you can handle all these different kinds of things and structure the API so it can grow. And that's what this was intended to do, right? So that we could have these different kinds of commands. First of all, to say who you are and log in, set up communication, describe what you can do, and then giving commands, whether it's literal grab the steering wheel and the throttle kind of commands like these, or the same kind of commands for a pan. If it's just a pan tilt zoom mechanism for a camera, maybe you want to run a self-test, or maybe then I think Scott, you brought it up. Maybe you want to give it a waypoint and say go a foot forward and 2 feet to the right, and then let it work out how it does that. However it needs, whatever the platform needs to do that, let it figure that out.
I have another potential use case. It's slightly different in nature, and we talked about humans sort of interactively in some fashion, using this remote robot. But should we be able also to have a controller, meaning software running remotely that controls at a high level the robot? And I'd be talking about API. Right, when we're talking about API, I'm thinking that implies I should be able to write software that uses the API, right? So
Sure.
Is that one of the maybe unstated or implied use cases here, that I'll be able to write a piece of code that uses the API, gets the sensor information at whatever rate is possible, right? I mean, there's going to be a delay and so on. And then I have control logic running on my computer that's producing commands that get sent back to the robot. Is that a use case we want to be able to do? Or maybe you have implied it, right? I'm not sure if you've thought about those lines, but because we're talking about APIs, so that's what I'm thinking almost when we talk about APIs. Because if we are not, because if it's only going to be humans, then at the end of the day, the only thing that matters is what's the user interface going to be, right? Because that's the only thing I see as a human. At some point, I don't care about anything else. And we should be spending a lot more time about the user interface, because as the human, I don't care how it's implemented. Of course, we have fun implementing it, but then the end result is the user interface, and that's all I see, and that's all I care about, right? So just give that some thought, right?
So is that something you'd like to do, Chris? Is that something you'd like to see in this? I mean, I think it would look kind of like this, wouldn't it? You would just take this and then have, and then you would just, instead of it's a control UI, then it would be a, it was
high-level controller there, yeah. I mean, again, I don't know how practical that is. It's again along the lines of the interactive use. I don't have a good sense how much sort of the latencies there, you know, and not so much we have bandwidth problem. We have plenty of bandwidth, right? It's more the latency, and I don't know how that's going to impact the user experience or the ability to write the high-level controller that implements some form of autonomy, you know, remotely. And it would have to be leveled above the built-in autonomy. Again, I shouldn't be able to smash it into the wall, right?
Right.
It would still have to have some onboard minimum level of obstacle avoidance, right? It's not going to let me get any closer or drive any faster than X, right? But within those constraints, maybe I'll write a little controller remotely.
So it sounds to me like Chris is segueing into version 2, which we talked about and kind of hadn't said anything since the January meeting, is that one of our potential goals was to make a contest robot where you send in your control module. You don't control it remotely, but you write and send in your module. We load that on the robot and let the robot go through the paces you programmed.
Yeah, it's a kind of a different flavor of it, right? And maybe more practical, right? Because if you submit your implementation, then again, all the latency stuff is out of the picture and stuff gets a little easier and more practical. And I'm just more like brainstorming, hey, is it even useful to have that ability? I honestly don't know if it would be useful to have the ability for me to have a piece of Python code running on my laptop, sending commands to this computer, to that remote robot. Again, I don't know. I don't have a good feel for how much a problem the latency would be, and you know, so.
Yeah, I personally have to think that's not very likely to be useful, just because of what are you really trying to accomplish? I mean, you're seeing what you're seeing, and the robot has got its sensors, which it can provide you information on. But I don't see having a program controlling it being all that useful. You're kind of controlling it yourself, I'd say. And
so yeah, I mean, that's up for debate, right? I mean, that's the question. Would it be useful? I don't know. I just thought I'd put it out there.
I'd like to turn it around and say, Chris, that sounds pretty interesting. And, you know, that's one beauty of an API, is that if it's well structured, people find ways to use it that's interesting to them that was never conceived of in the first place. And that's why I like to brainstorm at this level, because that's a cool way to think about it in my mind. And I would suggest to you that if you keep your eyes on this and watch how it evolves, if you see an opportunity that says, hey, you know, you expose these things right now on that client-facing side of the API, if you would just expose this sensor data or that information, I could write a controller pretty easily that would replace the human UI and let me do some cool things for my Python code on my laptop. So I'd put that out as an open invitation, because after all, we're here to have fun, right? We're here to challenge ourselves, to try things we haven't really thought of before. And not that it has to have any socially redeeming value beyond that. But I mean, after all, we spend hours each week here on this call, right? So we ought to do something we get a kick out of.
Do you guys think the most difficult part is this remote communication?
Well, why constrain yourself by the most difficult part, right? I mean,
Yeah, I'm thinking. I mean, if we have if we figure out this communication, then someone could go make a robot. But
exactly. Yeah,
I'm thinking, without that communication, yeah, we've got plenty of robot around. I
exactly.
think that communication is kind of what we. I mean, I think we should get that like one prototype first, and then we work on both side or multiple version of robot to add to that bone, that little bone from remote to local. And yeah, so that's I guess
Yeah.
that's
So
what I think.
I think to even evaluate the different ways by which this can be done, and we probably don't need to build it from scratch, right? We just talked about there's so much out there in this regard, but I think we have to sort of think a little bit about, okay, how much data is there going to need to be going back and forth, and at what rate, right? And then because if someone starts doing a little proof of concept with Mqtt, how do we decide that that's good, right? I
Right.
mean,
Yeah.
it's I haven't done really anything that involves this kind of latency situation that we're talking about here, so I don't have a good hands-on gut feel for this, and even what kind of performance we need to achieve, right? Again, I know how long a ping to the Amazon cloud takes, and it doesn't take that long, but by the time you're done layering 5 layers of software on top of that, I don't know what some of these technologies can deliver, and I don't know how much we need. Faster is better, of course, less latency is better, but I don't know if give or 10 milliseconds matters, or give or 100 milliseconds. I don't have a good sense. I think we need to get a handle on that.
So how about this as a proposal? So what happens if we pick as a kind of get our hands dirty, do something kind of a first test? What happens if we just take and set it up so that we set out to, I mean, forget all this fancy schmancy stuff. We think about that for the long-term roadmap, multiple users, multiple robots. But what happens if, just to start off, we say, let's just try a HTTP gateway that takes a command from Postman. Maybe it's a microserver instance on Azure or something, but it takes a command from Postman that says, move forward, set the forward velocity to 10%. And then we have an API that accepts that HTTP command, then it sends it down as HTTP to the robot, and the robot starts to move. So does it get any simpler than that? Go set the forward speed to +10, set the forward speed to 0, set the forward speed to -10. And then you could use that to evaluate, well, with HTTP, what are the lag times in this server? With MQTT, what's the delays and lag times?
Yeah, I think one thing I will try on my end is the Romy platform, and Ray may know that, right? They did some of the samples that come with that. When you operate it, with the Pi on top of the built-in controller, it comes with a little Python script that implements a web server, and I can go to that, on my phone, and it's a very crude web page, right? Showing me all the analog sensors, and it also shows me sort of a little mouse pad kind of area where I can put my finger on and slide around, almost in absence of a joystick on the phone, right? My point is, and that's obviously on local Wi-Fi. The point is, it is, I mean, whatever delay is there, it's not noticeable to me. That's how fast that is, right? And that's using HTTP, and it's very, very primitive stuff at the end of the day. But where I'm going with that is I'd like to know, okay, now if I had some, and that's interactive, right? So again, there's no video stream coming back, but it's me interactively controlling the robot, through a little web interface. and it responds instantaneously to my command. Now I'm gonna try to sort of route that through the Amazon cloud, right, to add some delay, which isn't much, which should hopefully add no more than 60 milliseconds by my calculation. I'm trying to get a feeling for it just from a user experience point of view. What does that do to the user experience of me trying to sort of do joystick real-time control, right? Just so I have a better sense of at what point does all of that fall apart. And of course, video needs to be kind of part of the loop, and that's probably the bigger issue. How do you get low latency video back? And I think we need to get a handle on that, because ultimately that's going to limit the degree of interactivity that you can get, right? Because if there's a half a second video delay, no matter how quickly those joystick commands get sent around, it becomes irrelevant, right? The video is going to be the limiting factor. And I know that from sort of different drones I've used and what I've done previously with the Raspberry Pi and the camera on it and on the robot and driving it around, trying all kinds of different ways to sort of reduce the video latency. I mean, if that gets beyond a certain number, and I'm not sure what it is, maybe, personally I find even the 200 millisecond lag in the video, it starts to really become a problem. And so I think it'd be good to understand sort of what's realistically possible. I don't know how much lag there is right now in what the video coming from you guys, right? It's, it's not bad, but it's, but that's going to limit sort of what I as a user realistically be able to do from an interactive real-time control point of view. And I think we should find out what that is realistically that we'll be able to do. Because I think it'll be fun to kind of control it in real time, right? It'd be a lot more fun to control it in real time compared to say, okay, go to point B and then I sit there and wait. I mean, that's definitely an important use case, but it'd be more fun to have real-time control, but that's going to be technically more challenging.
Hey, Carl, did you see this as more, like two streams, what the remote operator can see and what we can see of the remote operator? So, or is it just one stream?
I'm not following your question, Ray. I'm not following your question. Could you repeat?
It seems like most telepresence robots, the person operating the platform can see, they have a camera, but you can also, they also have a screen of that person's face, so you can see them. Did you see this as one stream, going out to the user, or two streams?
What?
So you're asking if the robot should have a display that shows my face?
Yes.
Yes. And that's why I was throwing out the idea of a laptop basically on top of a platform. That was the main reason I was sending that ideal.
Sure. I mean, exactly that. I mean, I figured it would be it would be a little more boring without that. So it ought to, if we think about the social interaction idea, right? Being visible and interacting with somebody, then it ought to be both ways. It ought to have eyeballs or a camera, and it ought to have a screen that presents.
You can see that person. Yeah.
You can get a tablet for pretty cheap, and if you can use Wi-Fi as opposed to an LTE signal or a 4G signal, it should be pretty quick to run, like you say, Zoom or Google Meet or Skype or whatever on it.
That implies no tilt and no zoom on the camera part.
Well, the tilt and zoom doesn't have to come from the application that's running the video. It can come from the robot controller for the robot.
And that's why I was saying having the laptop on top of the robot, and the robot could do the tilting effectively.
Well, you could have just a kind of like a phone,
right?
Be tilted or panned. That's the same effect. So
yeah, a couple servos on a phone, and you've got your zoom, pan, and tilt.
Well, you've got the pan and tilt, and then for the zoom, you could do the so-called dolly zoom, which means you just drive closer or further back. It's called dolly zoom. Yeah. Look it up. Dolly zoom.
It's all going to be good until somebody wants to tickle your underarms.
Okay, so should this robot have an underarm that whenever you tickle it, the robot squirms and falls over?
No, I'm saying a remote operator is going to tickle your underarms over at the makerspace.
Oh, okay.
And you're going to get Zoom bombed?
Yes. Well, that comes back to the ID stuff, right? So, I mean, we want to, if we're going to expose this, we want to make sure that, you know, it's authorized people at least driving it around.
Yeah, you could always stick up an aberrant platform up on blocks so he can't go anywhere, you know?
It works as long as we're bigger than the robot, right?
Right, yeah.
You could just put a switch to the motor controller.
That's true.
Yeah.
A low-tech approach.
Cool. All right. Hey, so Chris, I'll commit to you if you want to do that little exercise with the Romy lag measurement routing through Amazon. What I'll do is something I did before a couple years ago with my line follower that was distributed, and the trick would be to basically have a phone taking a picture real time of the hands, and then after the hands pass through like Zoom and come back on the display, then you can measure it actually in milliseconds of delay with the video editor afterwards. So I'll do that. I can do that for sure and tell you what the lag might be. Like, what are we experiencing here? The round trip time from photons through the server back to photons again. Cool.
Yeah, I have no idea. You know, can MQTT even handle higher bandwidth video streams?
Oh, no. MQTT is not for that at all.
Yeah.
It's a different. So, I mean, it seems to me that, well, it's a pub sub thing, right? So it could have its one set of uses which are interesting, and whereas HTTPS are different. So I was thinking that the nice combination would be HTTPS and sockets, or MQTT and sockets, but whereas sockets then give you the real-time low latency thing, but the HTTPS gives you something more reliable. You don't have to set up and tear down sockets.
Yeah, so for both HTTPS and just raw sockets, you're gonna need a middleman in the cloud
Yeah.
somewhere, right? Because
Yeah.
otherwise you're gonna have to open a hole in your firewall to let things through, and we don't want to do that. So, and that's why I've again been starting to think about, okay, how do I test sort of the round trip going through the Amazon cloud? I mean, that's what I happen to have. I know we would be more likely to go with the Azure, but I just happen to have Amazon stuff already set up.
Sure.
That's, you know, and so because you're gonna have to have a man there, you know, that accepts the incoming connections from both ends and kind of, you know, establish it ultimately end to end, because that's otherwise it's just not gonna sort of be secure. And so you'll need some technology sitting there that just does that out of the box and transparently. I'm sure it's I'm not sure what it's called, but I'm sure it exists.
It must, yeah. Cool. Hey, well, we've spent about an hour. Are there any other? I hope this was a good discussion. I found it interesting. Are there any other topics on this we would want to dig into? Any other ideas come to mind in this iteration? So, Doug, what do you think? We have some more stuff to chew on here.
Yes, I think we got a bunch of good feedback, and I think we're making progress. It made me think that maybe I've been even approaching the part that I wasn't assigned to be doing. I think I was working in your section instead of mine.
Hey, it's bound to happen, right? Because you can't. It's hard to define one. It's hard to define an API without thinking of both sides, right?
Right.
Because otherwise, you got probably an imbalanced, badly designed API. It's more like a wish list than an API. So, cool. All right. Well, good. Well, I don't know. Somehow I'll try and get these notes compiled, such as I have, and those of us focused on that one area can keep working on it. If anybody wants to get on the email thread, just speak up and we can add you. Otherwise, we're just doing it ad hoc off to this side. So, okay. So that takes us to second part of the little different meeting tonight. And that would be this coming up Saturday's builder panel for outdoor rovers. So for those who might not have been there when we got started, the idea was that we have a session coming up this coming Saturday. There's the kind of detailed view and a simple view. And the basic idea is we'll have 3 or 4 people who've built outdoor rovers before that we all kind of respect. And the idea was to try and, let's see, where'd the agenda go? The idea was to let, give a few minutes to each person at the start where they could tell everyone about their robot, just name, what it looks like, what's unique about it, what's cool about it. Then we would have a section where, as a moderator, I would probably, it would be I probably, but we would run through some questions across the panel and see what discussion ensues. And then we just devolve into open Q&A like we seem to anyhow. But the whole idea here would be that, you know, as time comes on, hopefully we can get some excitement for outdoor rovers and have more than 1 or 2 of us build a rover for August DPRG competition and get back together in person and thumb our noses at COVID. So with that in mind, I put some ideas down here on what kinds of topics might be interesting to ask about. You know, what's the environment? What kind of task goals you're trying to accomplish? Are you using wheels or some other thing? How are they hooked up to the platform, sensors, actuators? So anyhow, if we just go around the room, what, and I can take notes here, what kind of questions, and this is not to answer the questions tonight, but what kind of questions would people here on the call tonight like to have our panelists talk to on Saturday?
I've got one. Are you limiting the drive systems to electric?
Okay, good question.
Can they be hydrocarbon fuel? You know me, I like building big.
I think the club, the intent was for robots that we might be building amongst ourselves versus something that NASA might be sending to Mars, for example. But I mean, if you're going to do a hydrocarbon-based monster, and you want to ask, then what? Let's play Jeopardy. Can you put that in the form of a question?
Are you limiting the fuel source to electric, or are we able to use gasoline?
Okay, so how would you ask that?
The rules state it has to be electric. I mean, if you go by the Robo Columbus rules that DPRG publishes, yes, it has to be. It can't be gas. I don't remember the details. Maybe Doug does. He's more into the rules than I am, but
let's update those rules.
I'm sorry, Doug?
Yeah.
No, this is Ray. I said, let's update those rules.
I'm just curious because, you know, it's got other applications besides Robo Columbus and, you know, batteries.
So maybe to rephrase it as a question, right? So the question then would be, is gasoline a good idea?
Yeah.
What could possibly go wrong, right? So
yeah,
it's been around for like 150 years.
Crashing, burning.
Is a thorium reactor okay as well? I'm just asking. You know,
you got
I'd like to put one in my backyard, actually, but
animal power.
There is an adage that you never want to build a robot that can run faster than you can, because you have to.
I'm not talking about gasoline drive direct to the wheels. I'm talking about gasoline drive to create off of a generator to have an abundant source of electricity. Gas is relatively cheap and easy to convert to electricity.
I see. So you're talking hybrid.
Yeah, like a hybrid drive system.
Yeah.
So I have a question.
Like
So
a gasoline robot that'll outrun me, like a go-kart.
Oh God. How about lawnmower speeds? That's a little safer.
So I've
Exactly.
never built anything outdoor or any larger robots for that matter. So the question I would ask such a panel would be, hey, just can you give me like the top 10 gotchas, right? For someone who has never built an outdoor robot and only is used to indoor stuff where there's no water and no elements, and what are the top 10 gotchas, that people who have not done that before need to be, thinking about?
Cool.
Good question.
I posted my question in the.
I can rattle off about 5 of them right now, but
No, Saturday, man. Just questions only tonight. No answers.
I posted my question in the chat so they get a chance to look at it. But basically, I found this thing called XMI. XMI. It's a fully 3D printed NASA-like rover robot sort of thing, and I'm thinking about making that a to be done project on my stream, and I want to build one of them, and I want to think what they think about those things. And it just runs on a Raspberry Pi. It's about 2.5 kilograms in weight. The build. There's a lot of servos in there that's driving those things.
I didn't read it all. Was it a telepresence robot? Could it see and transmit video?
Yeah, I guess you can. Oh, and by the way, it runs on ROS too. So that's one of the
All right. Okay. Good.
If you just that's that robot. That's the 3D model, and I think you just scroll down a little bit further, you can see maybe other pictures of the thing, and just kind of what you think about it. Is it going to blow up too bad? Keep scrolling a little bit. I think there's a thing or under at the very top. There's a thing called features. Yeah, there it goes. That's it. That's it in action. It's not very big, but it's built very similar to some other things that we're well acquainted with.
That's a pretty cool looking little kit there, Harold. Look at that.
And it's it's all online, fully 3D printable. The whole works.
Oh my goodness! You're going to set a new bar for us. Okay.
I don't know about that, but I just if because I don't know. Obviously I don't know what the hell I'm doing. So that's my question is to the folks. So check that out for me, please, and give me your thoughts on it, because I think I'm going to build one of those things after I get done.
Can you give us a link to it?
What now?
How about a link to that?
It's in chat.
Okay.
It's already there. Yeah. Okay. Great question. All right. Now we're getting to be on a roll here. What other questions? Go ahead, John.
So based on the video, I would say that it covers some of my questions, which was how high does the reel have to be to go over stuff, the minimum, the max? Is it better to have assist reels where you have independent reels versus fixed reels? Those are the type of things I tend to see as problems, or what are ideal solutions to those problems. And then water, of course, is one of the things. Hence, how high up does it need to be? Or can you build one that sort of does both?
More generalized to what John was saying, I just need to know what type of parts and stuff you can expect to need here. How big a motor, or that kind of stuff.
How much power does it need to move? Yeah. Because thick grass versus skinny, long type grass versus concrete. Yep.
Here it has to be able to drive through 3 feet of snow.
That too.
Wow, robot.
Okay, I got a question.
16-horse motor that you needed.
Carl.
Say what?
I have a question, but I need to present it. It'll just be a short.
Sure. Let me stop then. Go ahead.
Okay. God, I haven't done this in so long. I forgot how.
Lower right corner. Present now.
There it is. Okay. I don't know if this is going to work, but I'm going to give it a try. Okay, let's see. Let's start. Come on, start.
A robot lawnmower.
This looks like a killer wheelchair.
There we go. So that is electric drive, but it has a gas engine that powers the deck. So does that qualify or no? That's my question.
Qualify for what?
So are you generating what, 120 volts out there?
Say that again.
What type of generator are you using? Is it, in other words, is it just one of those little Harbor Freight $100 generator that generates 120 volts?
Oh, on this thing, it's there's two 12-volt batteries on it. See them?
Okay.
Yeah, and then two wheelchair motors on the back. But the gasoline engine powers the mowing deck.
Right. Okay.
Yeah, and I have an alternator, a 24-volt alternator for it because those batteries are a little small to basically provide most of the energy that the wheelchair motors need for,
Right.
you know, to power them. So, but
Where'd you find? Okay, 24. I would thought you got a generator from the car to generate the volt, but okay, yeah, 24 volt.
yeah, it's a modified alternator that you
Ah,
basically just change the regulator out and you can get
right.
24 volts out of it to charge two batteries.
Speaking of changing, you better change that blade because you're not cutting that grass real good.
No, well, yeah, that engine is very noisy.
So what would your question be for the panelists, Ray? Or do you want to be on a panel?
Is this an acceptable platform? Because it is electric drive, but you know,
Acceptable for what?
as an outdoor robot.
It looks like an outdoor robot.
Well, yeah, for the contest, you know.
Oh, for the contest.
Yeah.
I think isn't there a size requirement on the contest? I think it's, I don't know, 24 inches or something. I don't know. Again, Doug, I'll defer to you.
Well, I have the push mower version of that as well, but I don't have any video to show. So.
Okay, let's pause for a second. Let me ask everybody. So, when I set up this outdoor panel after Doug D suggested it, I wasn't thinking that it was specifically focused on. I was thinking that it was not specifically focused on the DPRG Robo Columbus contest. I was thinking it was more of a general purpose panel of people that have built outdoor robots. So is that something what everyone would like to see, or would everybody like to have a really focused discussion on Robo Columbus? So let me see a show of thumbs or hands. Who wants it to be more general purpose, open-ended? I see a bunch of hands, including panelists. Who wants it to be focused on Robo Columbus? Okay, so let's keep that in mind. It's great if we have Robo Columbus specific questions, but this panel is beyond that, right? Sky's the limit. Well, maybe not Mars, although it's an interesting time for Mars rovers, but let's try and keep this focused on things which, you know, we as a group might want to build in our either singly or together. Things which would be within our reach.
Kareem, is how large is your platform that you're using to write letters with lights?
That one is it fits in an 18-inch cube.
Oh, it's that small. Okay.
In fact, that one you hid down sand, right? If I remember how it did, right? So you might talk about how
I've done it more on sand than anything else.
So you might talk
it'll
about
go
that.
it'll go over grass too, but it also gets stuck on the boundaries.
So is better on the sand versus grass? Okay, so can you you could describe why the difference?
No, I didn't say it does better on one or the other. I mean, each of those things. Well, we're getting into answers that I can answer.
I know, but I'm saying
it's a good question. It's a good question about, you know, what your goals are for the kind of terrain you want to manage.
Right.
Yeah. Have you ever done a 4-wheel drive, like a skid steer, Kareem?
No, we have not done a skid steer.
Okay. Yeah, I was
We've
thinking.
done plenty of mecanums and differential drives. No skid steers. Well, I mean that's not true. So when you say skid steer, I mean we've done tank robots, so that's technically a skid steer, right?
Yeah. Okay. But have you done them specifically for outdoors and do, skid? I can't even say it.
No, I haven't done a skid steer for outdoors, but David has, right?
David Anderson.
Yeah.
Yeah, right. It's 6-wheel drive.
Robot, right? Yeah.
Yeah.
I have some questions.
Shoot them out there.
Okay, one of the ones that I would like to, to put on the list would be the different panelists, how they've done their data fusion with their GPS. There's probably 2 or 3 different methods that you got 3 people. I'm sure they all did it 3 different ways. I'd like to know if I guess the second question I wanted to ask is, I really would like to know the details that are on Jesse's robot, because it's an RC car, which is similar to the one I'm building. And I'm curious of how the details of his encoder, how he made his encoder work. I know he put it on the big spur gear, but maybe if he could have a few pictures of it, it would be kind of cool. There's also, I'd like to hear, has anybody had any experience with autopilots? That's that's seems like the short way to do these things. Skips over a lot of problems.
You mean like those drone autopilots?
Yeah. Well, you've got to remember most of those drone autopilots really originated as rover autopilots, and they evolved into helicopter and then into drones. So anyway, that would be one thing. Another question that I'd like to hear. I had a whole list of them, and I'm planning on sending you a list, Carl. But I don't want any. I don't want any answers tonight. I'm waiting for Saturday.
Yeah.
And but there's a lot of technical details that I would be interested. There's a lot of subtleties on the different robots that I'm hoping that the people, because I've talked to these people, some of the panelists before, so it's not like I haven't seen their robots. But I know that there's a lot of subtleties on them that if you didn't really know the guts, you probably wouldn't even know enough to ask about it. So I'm hoping that in their 5-minute discussion, they, it might make sense to have sort of an outline of things to touch on, like, I don't know, what type of motors you use, okay? Now, I think Doug D asked, he'd like to know what type of motor to get. Well, that'd be something that we would all be interested in. The other thing would be, how do they communicate between the different buses? I know there's 2 or 3 different ways. I know there's 2 or 3 different approaches that different people have taken. And I'd like to know why they took that as opposed to going other ways. Okay, because I think I've heard some of that story too, but it's very interesting. So, and we're going to have a good selection of robots being discussed. There's a lot of different approaches that are being taken by the panelists. It's going to be really cool. So I'm just hoping that I don't want to build any of their robots, but the one that I want to steal ideas from all of them if I can. So that's and I think the 10 gotcha question, you might not want to go to 10, you might want to say 5, but that's definitely a good question. What are the top 5 gotchas? And I guess if you take the motor specifications a little bit further, you might ask, well, what motor driver did you use? how many amps do you supply? What power equipment do you what type of batteries do you have? How long will your robot run without a recharge? How do you implement your emergency stop button? There's, most contests require that. And even though we're not talking about any specific contest, that is still usually a really nice feature to have on a robot, a way to stop it remotely. So, I think we might even have one there. I don't know if Jesse's actually has a stop on it. I think they pretty much let them run in there. Yeah. Yeah. It's so simple, right? Right. Just push the button. Yeah. But those are the type of questions I'd like to see. I'd like them to kind of get under the cover and show us how they approached it, because all of them are very successful robots. I'd love to see, how they're doing. And I guess the other question, one that I hadn't thought of until now, is do they have anything that what's their plans as they continue? What's the next feature that they want to add? Because I'm sure they're all ready for one more feature. Because if we get some real competition out there this year, this August, then I'm sure that'll raise the bar for next contest. That's all I want to say.
Good list, thank you. Yeah. Turn a couple of my own along the way. Hey, show of hands or thumbs, who on the call is thinking to build an outdoor this year and try and have something for August? Okay, I see some elbows and hands. Oh no, not the downward thumb. Oh boy, okay, some waffles. All right, all good. So some of us. That's good.
I would like to build one. I just feeling overcommitted with all the other projects. August isn't that far away.
No, it's creeping up fast.
I have no idea how to control it though.
Details. It helps to have a target though, right? And that's maybe one thing where the contest comes out nice, because it gives you at least a target to aim for, some kind of design constraint.
If I was closer, it'd be something I'd be interested in, but it's a little far away.
Fair enough. Totally fair.
But the info we could get from something like you're proposing for Saturday would be great.
Hopefully, that's what we want to do, is find a way to find something for everybody. Okay. Any other question? Oh, David Anderson is muted. I don't know if you're trying to say something or not. There we go. Yep.
I see that Scott has joined us this evening, which is great. There have been some discussions in the past that I think really could have aided from his input. In particular, the discussions we had a few weeks ago about the BNO 055, which Scott has used, and to great effect. And so people who are having trouble with that might want to query him about it.
With that in mind, do we want to move off of the question brainstorming for Saturday and just dig into our regular roundtable? I'm seeing some nods. So if we want to do that, so Scott, I don't know, not to put you on the spot or anything, but go ahead.
I just had one question. I just stuck in the chat a link to the JBot web page, which hasn't been updated in a long time. The robot's actually a little different than is shown in those photographs or anything, but that's all I was really planning to do for Saturday. I've got some videos, but they're all too long. So I thought since those are available from that website, so could I get everybody to look at one right now?
Yeah.
Okay, if you go to that website, at the top of it should be a picture of an older picture of the JBot, and then you scan down to, let's see, the third paragraph that then begins the concept of the robot, and it ends with JBot moved under its own power for the first time, and that's the video. Download and watch that video. It bears on our skid steer. Go back up. Go up to the very top. Keep going up. More up. Okay, now down a little. Okay, see the sentence that begins, "The journey robot is"?
Yes.
Go to the next sentence. Okay, the next sentence begins, "JBot is a fully," and the third sentence begins, "the concept for," and at the end of that sentence is a link.
This one right here. All right.
That one.
So we'll just.
So y'all can just download, view that at your leisure. There's not much to it.
We'll call this a reference video for skid steer on grass. Right?
Okay, for those who have seen it, basically what that shows is the rover rotating in place. And if you look at it carefully, you can see that the front and the rear wheels scrub sideways, like a tank tread or any other scrub steer vehicle. But if you look at the center wheels, they do not. They drive around the perimeter of a circle, just like it was a two-wheel differential drive robot. And that's one of the reasons we went with the six-wheel design, because you can do odometry much more stably with that. Also, and there's some other videos, I haven't dug through them, but that all six of the wheels are independently sprung. We had never, when we designed this, we'd never seen a skid steer vehicle with we had not seen in our research a skid steer vehicle with independently sprung wheels. So we actually didn't know whether or not it would work, but it actually works remarkably well, and can climb over curbs and go up and down steps and all those hard outdoor things that are maybe not covered in any particular robot contest, but which certainly exist in the out of doors if you want to just run your robot outdoors.
So David, I have a question for you.
Shoot.
Do you have, is the spring tension on the center wheels more than the four outer wheels that, to reduce friction on those four outer wheels?
No, but I'll tell you that when we constructed this and went through the design phase, we tried all sorts of things. We tried stiffer springs in the middle, and what we eventually came up with was that it worked best with the load equally distributed across all six wheels.
One point on this is that you drive all three wheels on each side from the same motor.
Yes, there's a belt on each side, so there's one motor and one encoder, if you will, on each side. So that's kind of what I was going to do Saturday. Is that appropriate?
I think so.
That is,
yeah.
That is just to point people to the web page and be lazy.
I mean, we're here. I mean, yeah, that's the whole point, is to keep it light on the panelists, but give you a chance to show what your robot is for those that haven't seen it. Give you a chance to say what's unique about it, so that people can understand what they should be focused on and looking at, thinking about. And I think that alone will start to generate some questions that, if we, for some crazy way, run out of the question list we already have. So, very good. Thank you.
That's all.
Yep. Excellent. Thanks. Okay, well, at this point, let's just swing around the table, I guess, and yeah, go ahead, Chris.
Well, because I'm already an hour ahead of you guys, so I figured I'll go first. And since we were just talking about BNO, the 055 IMU, so last week I talked a little bit about my experiments with the BNO 085. I hadn't gotten much last week. I think that what I said was, well, I've used it in this robot vacuum cleaner operating mode, and I mentioned that it gave me this consistent 2-degree error for every 360 degrees, consistently. All right, so I've been trying a few other things, including sort of 2 other operating modes. One is called game rotation vectors. That's the one without the magnetometer in use for the fusion. And then I've used another data reporting option called just rotation vectors, which I think, according to documentation, does incorporate magnetometer data. Now, the first observation is I didn't really see any difference between those two, which I found surprising. And, maybe I haven't sort of tested it extensively enough yet, but at least over just small spaces, I didn't find a difference there. I even held a magnet close to my unit, and I don't know if that's even supposed to mess things up, but it didn't really seem to affect anything. The other observation is in the game rotation vector, right, that doesn't use the magnetometer for fusion. I tested that a little more extensively. I did 100 rotations in place, and I did correct in software for that strange 2-degree error that it was giving me every rotation. Again, it was spot on, enough spot on so I could account for it in software. So after 100 rotations, I got pretty good results. Again, my angle at the end of it was 0 degrees, give or take a degree, right? So I was pleasantly surprised to find that doing so well. Again, that's just turning in place. Not the real super fancy use case. But what I did find is if I turn too fast, things go totally out of whack. So I was doing, in my little line following oval, I measured the maximum turn rate of 120 degrees per second, just based on this, how I set it up. That's what I measured. When I did my spinning in turn place at 240 degrees per second, again, after 100 rotations, spot on, I stop at 0 degrees. If I crank up the turn rate to more or less double that, which is a bit, unrealistically fast, of course, things are out of whack. So I don't know if there's some other parameters I need to tweak. Obviously, I'm not doing pirouettes. I'm not planning to do pirouettes, but I'm just thinking I want to make sure it's set up for the right range, because if there's sort of jerky movement, right, that jerky movement is going to be a lot of degrees per second potentially for a short period of time. So I don't know yet all the parameters that are tunable there with that. But again, the bottom line is it's doing pretty well. I mentioned last time my gyro that's built into the Romy platform, the LSM 33 something or other, was also doing pretty well. So right now I can't quite tell yet which one is doing better. That's kind of what I'm really trying to find out. I haven't done enough testing yet. But bottom line is the BNO 85. He seems to be doing pretty well also. So once I've accounted for that strange error. Then the other thing, I asked a question last time about, is it necessary to read the gyro at 400 hertz, or does it even matter at what rate they read it? And I got 2 answers. One answer was, yes, faster is always better. And one answer was, well, it kind of depends what sort of filtering is going on, on your gyro itself. So I thought about it a little bit. And I know on my LMS 33 on the Romy, it is doing all kinds of filtering, but I concluded faster is better, right? No matter what filtering it's doing, because the analogy would be reading encoder data. If I read my encoders once a second, I mean, I might as well not bother, right? You gotta, because you're integrating, there's a continuous function happening somewhere, and you're taking samples at discrete steps, and then you're integrating and then doing some math with it. If you're sampling too infrequently, you're just not going to get an accurate result. And it applies for odometry. Obviously, there's a point of diminishing returns, but the same is going to be true for the gyro. And I figure that's why they have the option. You can sample it at 200 hertz, 400 hertz, 800 hertz, and 1.6 kilohertz. And again, there's probably the point of diminishing returns, but faster is going to be better, regardless of what kind of noise filtering happens on the gyro itself. So, I look into sort of feedback on that assumption here. But again, faster is better because I'm, integrating there. And if I wait too long, again, if I take it to the extreme case, I read my gyro 1 second later. Well, I mean, my robot could have done one of these, right? And you wouldn't know which way it has turned and back, right? If you just read it too slowly. So again, my conclusion is faster is better, and I want to see if I can get even better performance if I read my gyro faster. So that was one comment / question. Any thoughts there?
Chris,
my comment would be that slower is better. One thing I found with the B&O 55 I use on my CAN robot is it has some settle time. And what I mean by that is as you're in motion, what you get from it is always just a hair behind where the platform actually is. So for instance, if you're running like a 4 square where you're turning 90 degrees each time, what you'll see, at least on my platform, is as you turn and then start to move forward, the robot will always correct back to, if you're turning right, it'll always correct back to the left. So it'll always overshoot and then come back. And I've always attributed that to the latency, because I'm running mine over the serial bus.
But are you getting heading? Are you getting heading from the B&O, which I know the B&O 85, and it's different. It gives me, in some instances, just the heading directly. Or are you reading degrees per second rotation?
No, I'm simply reading the heading.
Okay, so that's different then. That's different. So what I'm talking about is the kind of gyro where you read a more raw data, and what you get is degrees per second. And then you integrate that yourself. That's what I'm dealing with on the Romy platform. I'm getting a reading that corresponds to degrees per second. And that's where I'm saying I gotta read that as fast as I can, because especially as you turn fast, when you're doing one of these, if you don't sample that often enough, just like with encoders, if you don't sample your encoders often enough, at some point you just don't get the correct picture of what's going on with the motion. David?
Chris, that's actually a Nyquist problem, right? That is, you have to sample at least twice the highest frequency you think you're going to see. So if you start rotating more rapidly than the half the Nyquist frequency, you're going to, get fold over, and all kinds of weird things can happen. I think I basically observed the same thing that Scott did. I'm using that CHS6 robotics IMU, and what I found was I wanted to actually use it in replacement for the heading value I was using to calculate the odometry. But I found that it had a slope to it, a delay to it, so that it was actually always, it couldn't be used that way. It was actually always behind. And so I started removing functions layer by layer until I was all the way down to the raw gyroscope, which I think is what you're doing. Actually, it's not totally raw. The device subtracts off the offset. So if it's drifting one way or the other, it takes that. But then I read those. Don't get me to lying here, but I believe I do read those at 400 hertz, and I'll have to go back and look. I read it at a much higher rate than I use it. Now that I think about it, I think I'm sampling it at 100 hertz, and I average together with a running window. I average together 4 samples.
Yeah, that makes sense.
I don't have the code in front of me. Those numbers may be wrong, but
yeah.
That way I found I could get back an instant. Those are rate gyros, right? They tell you the rate at which they're turning, and I could get back a number that was basically almost identical to the number that I was getting back from the wheel odometry, from differencing the 2 wheels and dividing by the wheelbase. So that lag problem went away. But with the full Kalman filter enabled, filtering going on there, and there's a lot of state that's passing from one stage to the next, and that produced a delay that for my purposes, were not usable. Now, for the outdoor robot, that turned out to not be the case. I read back heading direct, actually yaw. I read them back in Euler angles. I read back yaw directly, and I plug that straight into the odometry calculation. That's an $1,800 device, and that's the only ones you could get back in the day. And I told everybody who looked down their nose at me for spending so much money on a sensor that, well, soon these sensors will drop in price, and I'll be ready.
Yeah, so the B&O, and I'm still trying to figure out, how much better can the B&O 85 do compared to just the raw rate gyro? And I don't have an answer yet, but definitely one of the benefits is, I don't have to read it that fast, right? Because if I put it into that mode where it just gives me the heading, and it's internally doing all the integration, and depending on what I tell it to do, doing a certain amount of fusion or less fusion, right? It gives me a heading. For, depending on what I'm doing with it, if it gives me the heading only once a second, it's still going to give me an accurate heading, right? I don't have to worry about, integrating a lot of small sort of incremental updates, because it's doing all that. So that's definitely one benefit of a sort of a sophisticated device like that B&O. But I still have to figure out, is it ultimately in the end doing any better? Again, there's so many different modes, and some of them use the magnetometer, some of them don't, and not quite able to see the difference yet. And maybe my testing is not, sophisticated enough. But that's where I'm at. I'm hoping it'll do better. It should. It's just $20, right? So it better be worth it. So again, it has advantages. If you don't want to be pulling data out of it 400 times a second, right? You don't have to. You can, I could ask you to give me data at 100 hertz. That would be plenty, and feed that right into my odometry. I don't have to sort of go crazy in trying to do stuff at 400 hertz and make sure, I can actually achieve the timing. So, but accuracy, I want to see how well it does over a longer distance. And I know everybody's complaining about the magnetometer messing things up. Again, I haven't seen that yet, but maybe it's just because of my insufficient testing. So here's then my question: if I put a magnet next to it, should I expect that to mess up the readings? If it's configured to use the magnetometer as part of its fusion, and I hold a magnet right next to it, will that mess things up? Because it didn't budge. It didn't do anything. So maybe I'm not doing something right, but I expected that to show in the readings, and it wasn't changing the readings.
So you actually attached the magnet to the robot? So as it drove around?
The robot stationary, right, spitting out a heading. I take the magnet, put it right on top of the B&O 085.
Okay, the magnetometer provides a long-term reference to correct the drift in the gyros. And because it's a long-term reference, it might take a while for it to distort it. I bet if you just put that magnet somewhere on the robot, anywhere, and drive it around, you'll see that the headings are off. I just add to that the robot that I'm doing this, where I'm reading the raw gyro, is an indoor robot. So it's traveling on a nice level flat floor. And that's why you can get away with just integrating the Z-axis gyro. When you go outside and you're going up and down and stuff like that, that won't work.
No, good point. And I forgot to mention that, right? That's definitely a limitation of the way I'm using the gyro that's built into the Romy. I mean, it's 6 degrees of freedom, so technically you've got all the data available to compensate for tilt and all that. But the B&O 085 in theory should be doing that. So when I tell it to give me the game rotation vectors, as I understand it, it's not using magnetometer, but it's using also the accelerometer to help, as part of its fusion, to give me a more accurate yaw, right? To compensate for that. So I've done couple tests where I'm taking my robot and I'm just doing one of these. I got to do a little bit more of that because frankly, I wasn't impressed with the results. The moment I do one of these, the readings are out of whack. So again, maybe there are limitations to how much movements how much tilting and pitching it can compensate for. But in theory, that would be one of the other benefits of the B&O device, that I can just tell it to fuse the rate gyro and the accelerometer and do the best, with all the data, and just give me the yaw, and so that should give me a much more accurate yaw than just the raw rate gyro. But again, the verdict's still out on that.
Well, I'm like David. I only use the yaw, the Euler angles that come out of it, and I went through a number of different IMUs, and of course this was a number of years ago, and when the B&Os weren't available, and I went through a couple of hobbyist or cheaper ones, and like David, I settled on a very expensive industrial one because what I found, and like he was saying earlier, is the magnetometer part, and that part of the fusion that starts to drift and starts to as the environment changes. For instance, we used to have the Robo Columbus contest out in a guy's backyard, and his neighbor had a metal fence. And I noticed in one of the contests, as I got closer to the metal fence, the error in my IMU started to increase. And I actually went for the fence at one point, even though I knew that the heading was changing. So I don't think you can understate the quality of an IMU, especially over longer distances. We're talking 100 yards here, right? Which in reality is not a long distance, but when we're talking about a navigating robot, that's a fair amount of distance to keep a heading. Very small error on your heading over that distance is going to throw you off considerably. So like I said, I agree with David's approach of having a very solid sensor. And the one I have now, and just like David's, I mean, it's rock solid. It doesn't matter where it drives through or what it goes across. It drifts very, very little once you've got it stabilized and configured for that environment.
What IMU are you using?
I'm using a Spartan Electronics. I don't remember the model right now, but Spartan Navigation. So they, and that was a couple of years ago. I hadn't looked if they're even still in business right now, but.
So that's probably not the answer you wanted to hear, Chris. Spend more money.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, but then again, since it's only been a few weeks that I've worked with IMUs, it's really the first time for me. I mean, and I obviously knew about some of the limitations and drift and whatnot, but overall, again, so far, I'm pretty happy with what I've seen, at least for my use case indoors, and I'm not going to have to travel more than 100 feet. It's mostly flat. And, you know, so far I'm happy, and I'm just trying to figure out how to really extract the most out of the sensors I've got, which is the one that came with the Romy and then the B&O 085. But like I said, I did 100 rotations at 240 degrees a second, and the thing was 0 degrees at the end, spot on. So,
Chris, this 2-degree offset that you see after a 360, does that unwind if you go the other direction?
yes, it's the opposite offset in the other direction. So it was very consistent. I was able to compensate for it in software to eliminate the effect of it. And again, in the end, I have a reading that's spot on. I just have to post-process the data that it spits out.
It seems like you shouldn't have to do that.
Yeah, I know. I went through the calibration procedure, at least as best as I understood it. There's an Arduino sketch that supposedly does calibration. I mean, I kind of did that. It didn't really change anything.
So if you go 360 degrees in one direction, you get off by 2. If you go back the other direction, you're now at 0. And you continue in that direction, it gets off by 2 in the other direction. It gets off by 2 in the direction you're rotating.
Yeah.
Curiouser and curiouser.
So I just multiply by a certain number, right, to kind of compensate for that, and that's it.
So Chris, so every 360 degrees, it's off by 2.
Yes.
Huh. That is weird.
Probably some magnet.
Anyway, fix it in software, right? So that's what I do anyway. I do software. So what the heck? Just fix it in software.
So what do you do? Scale it? Like say?
Yeah, I mean, exactly it. I mean, I just had to apply the right multiplier. That's it. Problem solved, because it was so consistent. And well, what I had to do is, right, since it spits out the heading, right, and I converted to degrees from the Euler angles, right? So what I had to do then is every time it gives me an update, which would be the new heading, I have to now look at that difference, right? And then apply the multiplier and then accumulate those delta headings myself, right? I couldn't just take the heading that comes out of it, multiply that with a special, constant. That doesn't work. I have to look at the increment, right? Okay, I just moved by 10 degrees. Okay, I need to multiply that by something and then add that to my new corrected absolute heading, right? So I have to convert the absolute heading I get to incremental heading, do the math, and then, but it is all trivial math. It's just, luckily, it's a very constant error. It is bizarre, and
if that's an error that you can fix with a scaler, which is what you're doing, right? You're just scaling it. It makes me wonder if somewhere deep down in the beast there is already a scaler that's just off a little bit.
Yeah. So I think that's it. That's it from my end. Thank you.
Probably the $50 gyro, you don't have that issue, I think.
Pat, what you got?
I've got an update on the robot. So I remember a couple meetings ago, I mentioned my static slippers I made. Well, the static slippers failed me. So as I was reaching down to the Raspberry Pi to unplug it, I could feel the zap. And yeah, it was about a half a second long. It zapped. And when I rebooted it, it seemed to boot. Everything was working, but very much slower. So something is fried in the Raspberry Pi. Replaced it with a backup. I had an additional one with only 2 gig instead of 4. It's up and running, so I've been able to still work on programming. I tied in my encoders last weekend and got the encoders running. One of them is running. The other one is dead. I'm not getting anything out of it. tried hooking up a cheapy little oscilloscope I had, a little tiny circuit board, and I'm not getting very good data out of it. So the question I had for everybody is, has anyone ever worked with like a Handtech cheap USB oscilloscope? So
DSO 2090.
Okay. I was looking, I don't know if I can present my screen. If I can find it, present now, entire screen. Share. So basically, it looks like I lost my picture. This is what I was looking at.
Okay.
So as it turns out, it's a little bit cheaper than that when I can buy it from Amazon Canada, and it's $82 Canadian. Basically, just looking for a 20 megahertz scope that can, dual channel scope that can do, a few extra features.
So you haven't purchased it yet?
I have not purchased it.
Okay, so there's the thing. So we bought, I think it was the variant of this that has it was the same model number except with the logic analyzer option.
Okay.
And we got one of those for a guy for Jack, who's in college now, but he was in high school at the time.
Okay.
So a few of us pitched together. I don't know that he's used it all that much, but it seemed to work okay when we've seen it. And I have the kind of granddaddy of that one. I think it's a DSO 2090. I've been very pleased with it, actually. The one I have. I don't have much time on that model number you have. The only caution that I would give is that what I saw from the 6022 there, or what I've noticed with my 2090, is that Handtech didn't bother to get Windows signed drivers for the damn thing. So I haven't been able to run it last I tried on Windows 10 box.
Okay, so
at least I can't install the new drivers on my new laptop. It runs okay on my old laptop, which used to be 2000, whatever it was, 2007, and I updated it to Windows 10. No, it was Windows 7, and I updated it to Windows 10, and that one still runs. The old drivers run, but I haven't figured out how to install the unsigned drivers for the new one on this new Windows 10 laptop.
So one of the reasons I was looking at that one is because they have open Handtech Linux software.
Yes.
So it was one of the reasons.
Well, SIGROC. Are you talking about SIGROC?
Well, there's open Handtech as well, but there is SIGROC that works with it as well.
Yeah. So, and again, we tried the SIGROC on Jack's. I think he had a Mac at the time. I don't think he had I don't remember what he had exactly, but I can tell you that the device that I've got works great. I mean, for a cheap 8-bit DSO.
Okay. So the one you guys recommended or bought for Jack, do you have a link to that you could post, or a model number or something?
Well, it was the 6022 that you have, except it was with the logic analyzer.
Okay.
Option.
Okay.
I can find it.
I'll have to take a look, see if I can use that on Linux.
I'm pretty sure SIGROC would work, but we had trouble getting it to do. Oh, go ahead. Who's going to talk?
Regarding your problem, Carl, just quickly, I mean, I don't know if you looked into that, you probably did, right? But you can put your Windows into test mode, I think it's called. You can turn off this unsigned driver verification thing. I had to do that in the past. Even on Windows 7, I remember I had to do it once. You can, imagine you're a developer, right? You're writing drivers, there's a use case for that. You have to be able to install like an unsigned driver because you're the one developing it. So you can put it into test mode, and then it lets you do that.
Yeah, no thanks. I was just reluctant to do that on my main laptop because it's work and personal, and I got to find a sacrificial laptop to do that on.
I have a virtual machine I use if I absolutely need Windows software.
There you go. I put the link in. I think it's the right one, Pat. But
okay, it's the 6022BL.
Yeah.
Okay.
Now the thing to remember is that if I remember right, this one, I think it's like an either or. I think it's a logic analyzer or an oscilloscope. I haven't been able to find a cheapy mixed signal one that except for Riegels, they seem to be the cheapest way to get into it. If you want to do like protocol decoding on logic analyzer at the same time you do analog signals, I think you're going to need to spend more. But
yeah, okay, it'll do one or the other, and that's typically what I've seen as well.
I think so. You just have to check the specs.
Okay. Thank you very much, guys.
20 megahertz bandwidth isn't very high. You know,
I'm running a 20 hertz loop.
Yeah,
well, yeah, you know, yeah, if you're looking at very slow signals, it's good. But...
No, for encoder signals, data signal coming across. So if you're using I2C and you want to try to capture a signal,
so if you're looking mainly at digital, you got to get yourself one of those $10, $15 8-channel logic analyzer gadgets. I mentioned previously on this call, I got it not too long ago, I guess last year sometime, and I regret not getting it earlier because that thing is dirt cheap. It's doing 8-channel, and that comes under different names, and I don't have it handy right now. But 8 channels, USB, not super fast. I think it can go up to 24 megahertz sampling rate. It's only digital, but since you mentioned I2C, I mean, it's decoding all those protocols for you using the SIGROC software. You can't go wrong with that. He's got one up on the screen there.
Can you put a link to that if you have it?
Yeah, it comes in so many different names. It's a knockoff of it's a knockoff of the original, Saley logic analyzer or something. But it comes under so many different brands and names from China. You can probably get it on Amazon. It's worth every penny, and it's not a lot of pennies.
Okay, everything is a little bit more premium up in Canada. We have to work harder for our US dollars here, but everything even from China comes in US dollars, so it's part of the cost of living up here in the Great White North. That's it for me. That's
okay. Cool.
All I was looking for. I didn't get a chance to do an update last week, and I'll be heading out of here shortly as well. It's 11:15 here at night.
Yep. Alrighty. Sounds good. Well, good to hear from you. Ray, or who has anyone else have something they want to bring up at this point?
I'll bring up a little bit. I'm kind of not happy with the ROS designers at the moment. I did get my joystick using a default node, and there's a translator that I was going to write, but no, they wrote that too already. It's just that I was having problems with it, and I beat myself up on it a lot. And it turns out, after I looked at it a little bit, one of the things that you can do with this thing is it takes an axis, which is all the different axes, all joystick axes and button presses and all that kind of stuff come through in a data center, in a data type, and it translates that into a twist, which has got an X, Y, and Z linear, and X, Y, and Z angular, and those sorts of stuff for giving you vectors. Well, I was getting a bunch of zeros all over the place where I know I mapped the things right. I got to looking, and I found out that you could also scale the number that when you're coming in, right? So it goes from +1 to -1, and I want to scale it up to +127 -127. I figure it's awesome. What do you think the default scaling factor should be or would be on this scaling thing that you would have in? Any ideas? Let me tell you, it's not 1. They default scale all that stuff except for a couple of them to 0. So 0 times what is what?
0.
Yeah, I spent way too long figuring that one out. Yeah, way too long. And then when I saw it, I'm like, oh, damn it, it better not be it. And it was. And so, but anyway, I'm making some progress on that. I'm feeling actually a lot better on that as I'm going and doing. And that made me enough mad where I shot video last night on my Twitch stream specifically so I could edit it and put it out on YouTube. Say, damn you, you zero thing, you zero scaling thing. Everybody's default should be 1 if you're going to multiply it by something. Come on, man. What am I thinking here? Am I missing something? You know, I don't know. Anyway, that's my rant. That's all I got to say. That, and I got a 3D printed me a lightsaber case today, and it came off pretty good. So we're going to be doing other stuff on Twitch. Anyway, that's about it. That's all I got. Just a whine. Just a whine.
We all stumble on those now and then.
But that's just like the stupidest default ever.
You know?
I have a quick update, or maybe a quick question. I mean, it's something I want to share with you guys. I heard about this Linux QNX. It's like a real-time Linux system. So first time I heard it, but I thought you guys were talking about some like Linux Raspberry Pi not real-time enough thing. So I mean, I don't know. Is this something interesting?
Say that again. I didn't quite catch that word.
It's QNX.
Oh,
it's
QNX.
like,
Okay. Yeah. No, I'm familiar. I'm familiar with that.
Does that solve like a real-time aspect of a Linux or Raspberry Pi?
Maybe, but that's not. I'm not sure if they're not really catering to the educational and hobbyist market. I mean, they want big bucks. At least last I checked, because I dealt with them in my professional life, and they've been chasing me, and so, but that's like one of those companies. They want big bucks.
So it's Linux, but it's not.
It's the kind of stuff that controls. It's the kind of stuff that controls nuclear reactors. So it's solid. It's solid technology, but it's better than what we need.
Got it. Okay. So it sounds like a good stuff, but it's not free. Well,
it is good stuff, but I mean, again, if you don't have the ecosystem around it that us types need, I mean, then it becomes worthless. It doesn't matter how much merit it has, right? Technically, if you can't work with it and nobody else has it, only you and 2 other people.
So
right?
Chris,
what's the point?
Chris, you're saying the best robot then would be Ross based on QNS.
Maybe. No, I actually think Linux always gets a bad rap. You just gotta configure it right. I've mentioned that before. You can get a lot more real time out of it than most people realize. So you just gotta do things right. I have to still respond to Murray's email there. And I have some comments there, but yeah, you can get a lot more out of Linux than most people realize. But it does take a little bit of pulling some teeth sometimes, but it's doable.
So Chris, you're able to follow what it is that Murray was doing?
Some of it. I mean, there's a lot to unpack. I was going to respond to him only on some comments about. My main comment back to him was really going to be around. Okay, he's asking one question, for example. Well, should I be worried about a timing error of a timing discrepancy of 100 microseconds? Okay, so I was going to fire a question back to him. I mean, what are his timing expectations and the requirements for what he's trying to do? Because a lot of time when people say, oh, well, Linux can't do that because it's not real time enough, or this other OS can't do that because it's not real time enough. And then I ask people, okay, so can you tell me exactly what your timing requirements are? Then they start to waffle, right? Because they don't always know. And so that was going to be my main response. You can't do much better than 100 microseconds. If you can get 100 microseconds timing accuracy on Linux, you're doing good. that's the best you can get out of it. Period. Don't expect more than that. So but you got to understand what your control system needs at the end of the day. Hopefully 100 microseconds doesn't matter. And the kind of stuff we're doing here, unless you're timing an ultrasonic echo, in which case microseconds matter. But for everything else we're doing, 100 microseconds don't matter. Now, once you get into the milliseconds, it starts to matter. So I think, one always has to have a good understanding of what the timing requirements actually are. And I feel most people don't think about that hard enough. But yeah, Linux is fine. You can get, with a real-time kernel, you can get below 100 microseconds sort of repeatability on timing. But again, you have to set things up right. And then if you layer too many things on top of one another, and then Python on top of that, which has its own limitations, well, at some point, you're not going to get the timing that you expect, because you just have layer on top of layer on top of layer, and there's going to be overhead and garbage collection and whatnot, right? And things are just not going to behave predictably anymore. But that's just oftentimes more a byproduct of the layers of software, on top of Linux, which is already layers of software.
Cool.
Well, totally unrelated to any of that. How many people have gotten their first shot for COVID? Oh, cool.
Oh, way to go, guys. Yeah.
Oh, cool. You guys are ahead of me. I just got my first shot.
Good for you.
Ray, how's your wife?
She's doing much better. Luckily it was just a mild case. She had kind of the muscle aches and pains, and a little bit of nasal congestion. She did have a rash in her mouth, but that's gone now. So I think she's feeling better. I think.
Has she been inoculated?
No. And now they're saying that she should wait like 90 days before she gets her first shot, because she's built up the antibodies herself. So yeah. Oh, you got yours today. Oh, that's cool. A couple of weeks and you may be able to brave the outside world.
Yeah, I got my first one yesterday.
Ah, okay. Yeah, I'm looking forward to the second on the 18th. First,
you guys
get a decent haircut.
You guys get Pfizer or Moderna?
Pfizer.
Moderna.
Yeah, I signed up for all 4 counties, and actually it was the Puckett Family Clinic in Honey Grove, Texas, which is in Fannin County, and so I've had to cancel all 4 the appointments for all 4 counties because they've come up now. So, but yeah, a while ago there, I was thinking I'm in Fannin County. I'm not going to get my shot until like August or something, because Fannin County just didn't seem to be that organized. But
well, I go through Baylor, and they told us that they're going to get some kind of disbursement or whatever that stuff, and to get on their list. And that's well, I was going to go through this, but you're telling me that I should say screw that and just start signing up everywhere?
That's what they recommended you do. Yeah.
That's what we did.
Say
That's
it
what
again.
we did. That's
Oh,
what we did.
Yeah. I signed up for all, for 4 counties: Dallas, Tarrant, Denton, and Collin.
Yeah, I signed up for right after they opened it up in Collin County, and somebody said, "Well, you really should sign up for all of these places." So last week I did that, and then they came through with Collin County. Now I got to go cancel all the others.
Cancel the others, yeah. That's what I had to do.
I got mine last week, and it was real interesting. So I get this call from Dallas, and boy, I jump on it, get my thing, and go on down there. the next day, I got it from Collin County, Denton County, all of them popped at the same time. So I had to then, like you said, get off those lists. And now I got to go back. And the funny, even my doctor, he's a Baylor, got it. So I could have just went to my doctor and got it, but I had to go down to Fair Park and get it down there, and they were very organized. I will give them that. They really did run a nice ship. But boy, I don't like driving downtown anymore.
Yeah.
Hey, that's only 4 miles from my house. I could have rode a bicycle down there, man.
Yeah. Well, that's good. I'm glad everybody's getting shots, and especially, some of us are getting older. Probably more susceptible.
Don't go there.
All of us are getting older.
That's true. Yeah. Yeah. Well, that's good. So I didn't mean to interrupt, but it's really bumming me out. I was like, oh God, this thing is never gonna end. Feeling kind of isolated up here. So.
It's when you stop getting older that it becomes a problem.
That's right.
Yeah.
The alternative's worse.
Yes.
Carl, I wanted to take everybody's time for a minute here. Just thank Dave Ackley for sending me the logic diagram of the XORs. I need to sit and ponder that, but thank you.
Very good. Cool.
You're welcome.
Yeah, I was thinking about that actually the other day. Do you just take the 2 pins, XOR them in software, and then oversample them, or do you outside with logic? Or?
No, what you do is you set up at least one of them to do an interrupt on either change.
Yeah, rising or falling.
The XOR of the 2 channels to decide whether to increment or decrement.
Okay. Yeah. I was looking at that. It looks like you check the state. If it's one, say a high, you have to increment. So the next one would be a low, right? But you still have to increment.
No. What you do is you take the XOR of the 2 channels.
Yeah.
If it's 1, you increment. If it's 0, you decrement. Period.
Oh, okay.
Now that assumes that you're triggering on the rising edge.
No.
Doesn't it?
Any edge.
Okay. Okay, as I said, I'll go back and study what you sent me. Thank you.
I'd like to see that myself.
Yeah, David, you QC that for me and tell me if I've got it right, but it looked like it was right.
Well, intuitively it seems correct, but I want to work through the logic.
Okay. Well, I took your chart and annotated it and said,
yes. Yes, thank you.
Hey, I'd be interested in seeing that. So, Dave, if you want to publish that, or send a link to it.
I'll forward it to the list.
Okay.
All right. Good. After you've QC'd it.
All right.
David, after you've checked it out to make sure it's right.
Sometimes it's really helpful to me to actually, in my head, single step through a process.
Understand. So, like I said, take it for what it's worth, and if you think it's right, then send it out. If not, if not, trash it.
Alrighty. So who else has something that we should talk about then?
I have one more thing, but I'll let obviously others go first, and then if there's nobody left, just one more brief thing from my side. Go ahead.
Okay.
I think there's nobody left.
I think that's right. Yeah.
All right. So, couple of weeks ago, I mentioned I bought some gadgets on Adafruit, This was one of them. It's a USB attached I/O expander, and it shows up on your host computer, which could be your Windows PC or your Raspberry Pi. It shows up as a UART, and it shows up as a HID device, keyboard basically. And it seemed interesting, right? It seemed like a way actually to get the Raspberry Pi an extra I2C port, maybe one that doesn't have kind of the hardware flaw that the native I2C port has. And so it seemed like a good idea to have an extra I2C port. Again, it's more of interest for those of us who use a Raspberry Pi and need to interface with other stuff. It turns out, though, that using it as an I2C adapter is not possible. But it's possible, but performance is just pathetic. I mean, so the nice thing is it shows up as another I2C port on your Raspberry Pi. So any software that wants to open an I2C port will go right to it. You tell it, okay, this is port number 11. Usually the built-in one is number 1. This one will show up at some other number. You point your software at that. It's all transparent except for performance, because when I use that one to talk to my Romy controller and compare the performance with what I can do with the built-in Raspberry Pi, I2C port. With the built-in I2C port, a particular transaction on the bus that I do to read the encoders takes about a little less than 600 microseconds. Okay, turns into a couple bytes back and forth on the I2C bus, basically, right? 600 microseconds. So with this device, doing the exact same transaction, and again, it's all transparent. My Python script doesn't care what I2C port I talk to. So it all works correctly, except the same transaction now takes 24 milliseconds. Okay, so into the garbage, basically, because I got to read a lot of stuff on I2C. Again, I was reading my IMU at 400 hertz and reading the Romy stuff at 100 hertz. So it's of no use, unfortunately, for that use case. So that's a bummer, because I was really hoping to, be able to have a second I2C port, and maybe even one that can do the clock stretching that lets you talk to certain things that, result in hiccups otherwise. Unfortunately, not the case. So,
well, does it do this stretching properly?
Well, that actually, I didn't get far enough to even find that out. I was kind of assuming it would do that you're right, it might not. I'm just kind of hoping it would, but after seeing the performance, frankly, I don't care now, right?
Yeah,
it's just,
it might be okay for something like if you're doing a humidity measurement,
right?
You know what I mean?
Right.
Which takes a long time, and so it might be okay for some of those really bad cases for the Raspberry Pi.
Now, there was one other alternative to the built-in native I2C port on the Pi that I tried. It's basically a software bit-banged I2C. So that the Pi comes with a driver for that. There's a way to enable it. I can dig up the details and send you. But that takes care of clock stretching, basically, right? It's all bit-banged in software. Now, again, it's going to be on the slow side. Actually, it is not that slow. It was only about half the speed of the native hardware I2C peripheral. So it was pretty fast, but it gobbles up a lot of CPU time, right? Because all that bit banging is happening in just code and busy waiting. So it gobbles up CPU time like crazy. Again, not always an issue on the Pi when you have 4 cores running at 1.5 gigahertz, but that was a downside. But that software bit-banged I2C peripheral supposedly deals with clock stretching correctly. Again, I haven't tested it to sort of verify, but that's what they say.
I've mentioned this book before. This guy tells you how to do it, okay, and also how to explain, understand the problem. This book, and I don't know what it costs on Kindle, but it's definitely worth it. So it's Raspberry Pi, IoT, NC, and I even have that section bookmarked. So you can do it, Chris. You just, if somebody with your programming skills, you might look at it. I don't know how much, like I say, I don't know how much the book costs, but I don't think it was more than 20 bucks, and that's the paper copy. So probably in Kindle, it's probably only, I don't know.
Chris, you say that the little dongle that you have now decided is worthless basically could give you 4 hertz.
Well, it was doing it. The transaction took 24 milliseconds, so that's what, 40 hertz.
40 hertz. I thought
40
I heard
hertz.
40. Okay, 40 hertz.
So I mean, it's not terrible. I mean, it's not unusable, like we said, right? I mean, for certain kinds of sensors, and maybe your other I2C bus is already fully loaded. Yeah, I mean, it's it can still add value, but for what I was trying to do, reading stuff at 100 hertz, no, it's not going to be usable. Now, interestingly enough, the UART that it provides, so it provides on 2 pins, right, I2C, and another 2 pins UART. So it presents itself as a USB UART also to your host computer. And I benchmarked that part, and that's comparable to other USB UARTs. So I did like a little loopback test, right? Connect the TX to the RX pin, send 30 bytes out, wait for those 30 bytes to come back in. And at 115 to 200 baud, that should take exactly 2.6 milliseconds. So you can kind of look at that, and it was giving me some 3 point something milliseconds pretty consistently. So that USB UART function that it provides was performing reasonably well, but just the I2C part stuff wasn't, and so it's unfortunate. Otherwise, it'd be a real nifty device. So.
I just looked up that book. It's $18 in print, and if you happen to be a Kindle Unlimited person, it's free. So might be worth looking at.
Thank you.
Quick question. How long is the panel discussion budgeted for on Saturday?
2 days.
Because I'm triple booked. 2 days, man.
We're not gonna go with that. We could go with it. I mean, we have 2 hours on the meetup, but I mean, we can certainly adjust things somehow.
I don't know. I'm kind of guessing the best outdoor platform is going to be, a tank steer mechanism, because even the thing that I showed you, if the wheels get the front wheels, which are just, unattached casters, they're not tied to each other or anything else on the, there's no steering mechanism. Sometimes those will hit something and the back wheels will just spin. So I can kind of do the old, jam it forward, pull it back, jam it forward until the front wheels get lined up, and it eventually gets out of its own way.
But I think best is always a function of the criteria. So you can't ask that without specifying the criteria. But so
if
like
we're going over grass and sand and weeds,
we take the criteria for the Saturday meeting. So for Kareem's question here, real quick. So I mean, we have 2 hours budgeted, Kareem, but
that's all right. I just wanted to know what it was.
Okay. If you have a constraint, just let us know, and we can tweak it somehow on the day or ahead of time if you know it.
And the start time is 1, I assume, or is it 12?
I expect Dave and Scott to do the heavy lifting anyhow. So
we'll make sure there's some good questions for you, Kareem. Maybe, but
Kareem certainly has the most experience among us.
Nonsense.
If you add up all the man years of your teams,
well.
So Ray, I would just this won't help you any, but when we worked on the 6-wheel robot with Mike Hamilton, who is now passed from among us, but Mike had built for 40 years, all kinds of off-road vehicles, both large and small. And when I first started talking to him about what I wanted to do, one of the things he said was, every wheel that touches the ground must be driven.
There you go.
On an off-road vehicle. Otherwise, you're just waiting for something to jam up, and the other wheels are going to have to try to pull it loose or push it loose.
Or
So, as I say, I know that doesn't help you any.
Oh yeah, no, I agree. I've been wanting to make one. It was one of those things. I was taking my wife to a physical therapy appointment, and I noticed there was this huge piece of conduit. At least I think that's what it's referred to. Well, actually, I think it's used to hang stuff with. It's like a
Unistrut.
Yeah, strut. Yeah. Anyway, there was a 20-foot piece of strut in the center of the road, and I actually went back like a week later and picked it up. And that's going to be my 4-wheel drive frame. But one end of it was bent a little bit, but I have enough, at 20 feet to make a frame, and I can cut off the bent part.
This sounds like a setup for an engineer's joke.
How's that?
Or just, driving down the road and spotted potential robot materials.
Oh yeah. And then the other piece that I got, which I was surprised it was so heavy. It's basically square with holes punched in it at regular intervals, and they use it a lot for street signs or temporary signs. And I couldn't believe how heavy that was. That that one piece, it was I don't know, it was probably about 4 feet long. It probably weighed about 20 pounds. I was really surprised. So, definitely heavy duty. I think if you hit one of those with your car accidentally, you're going to do some damage. So, but yeah, so those are the best pieces, the ones you find on, the side of the road. So.
Maybe not repeatable, but the best pieces, huh?
That's right. Yeah.
Cool.
Anyway, I do have another platform. I don't have any photos of it, but it's basically a push motor that is differential drive, and I've even experienced issues with that one with traction. The wheels were kind of like a diamond cut pattern, but they were old and a little worn out. I actually got ones that had kind of stair-stepped cleats in it. And I haven't tried it out yet, but I'm thinking it's going to do much better. And I have like a small incline that I can test it on to see, how well it does. And the other ones would definitely slip as they got to the incline if I was going too slow. So maybe I have to take the ramming force approach, get up such speed that I can overcome these short inclines. And,
ramming speed.
There you go. Just approach it that way.
Nice.
But yeah, so to me, that's definitely an issue. The grass and the sand and the weeds and all that are pretty tough to get over. So.
Cool. All right then. Well, anything else?
Carl, are you still out of state?
I'm still in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania. This morning I spent an hour and a half shoveling 5 inches of snow.
Wow.
I may have told you this, but one of my colleagues at SMU moved from Chicago to Dallas. And I told him that I thought I know they have a couple of really bad months of weather in Chicago. We have a couple of really bad months in Texas, so it all balances out, right?
Yeah,
Those are in the winter, ours are in the summer. And he said, no, David, it does not balance out because you do not have to get up in the morning and shovel the heat off of your driveway. Well, I said, okay, fair enough.
Yeah, that's great.
Well, they had the ice the ice crew's out in Dallas today, so it's expected to have an ice storm the next couple of days.
Yeah, that's what I've heard. Because I've been trying to map out when to do my road trip back, and it's a function of some commitments up here and whether I can find a hopefully mostly dry stretch for the 1,200 miles between here and there.
Yake.
You do that in one fell swoop?
No, with an overnight. So it's 10 hours of driving, and with all my stops, it's 10 hours of driving with my stops. It's a 12-hour day, 2 days for a single driver, but it works out.
Well, be careful.
I shall.
Because I certainly couldn't do that.
I would suggest after Tuesday.
That's what I'm looking at now. That's what I'm
they're
looking
forecasting through Monday.
Yep.
Being a problem here.
That seems to work out as long as it's clear across the country, and I'll find a couple of good podcasts, and just go into autopilot mode more or less.
Okay.
You know, one of the problems is that it only does this maybe once or twice a year. You know, you get this half-inch of hard ice that you can't see, and so nobody ever gets any good at driving in it. And as a consequence, the people who are driving in it are terrible. So even if you're being careful in your four-wheel drive vehicle, that big lady next to you in her Cadillac is going to lose it and push you off the road.
Yeah, that's exactly the case. And here I got a one-person truck with not much weight in the back, and it's a rear-wheel drive. So I just want to try and find. Yeah, and I know how to handle it, but it doesn't matter. So I'm just going to wait for the dry, more or less.
Probably the best approach.
Yep.
So we might not. You might not be here next Tuesday. Is that correct?
Yeah, we'll see. I might know by Saturday if I'll be on the road or not Tuesday, but probably Tuesday morning is the earliest departure, but we'll see how it goes. And if I'm driving Tuesday, then someone else will need to leave the meeting Tuesday night. So
okay. I just sent out a little, I hope, 2 websites I found that, Doug, especially you might want to look at.
Oh, yeah.
You see it there. I can show you the screen, I guess. At least I can try. I have them both up right now.
Yeah, I was busy looking at the second one too.
So you can do it all on a Raspberry Pi. There you go.
Yeah, well, we were talking about legs and that, and I don't know, but they both look interesting. So, let's see, will this work? There. So, okay. So this is the first one.
One of the downsides with those types of things is they work great in your local internet in your house, but they're not public.
Right, and I don't know. That's why I said I was just looking through it and found these 2. One's more involved, it looks like, and that's this one. But you might want to look at it and see, and we may try it out. I'm thinking I may actually have most of the parts on this one.
Yeah, I opened the browser page so I could take a look at it tomorrow.
Okay, so I would suggest look at that, but it looks sort of interesting. And the treasure course is lag time, which I have no experience on this either. So that would be one of the tests on it. But anyway, there's that one and the other one, which let's see if we can pop to the other screen now. Where percent now? A window, and I think that goes there.
I like the black ribbon.
Okay.
That one looks a bit top heavy.
So there's this one. Well, yeah, but the base is pretty heavy. I actually have the Rover. I don't know if I have the Deluxe version or not, but so yeah. But yeah, it could be a top heavy.
Do you really want to risk your $300 iPad 3 or whatever that is in the top there?
Well, I think they have an iPad. I think that's what.
Like that toy from a few years back, Weebles wobble, but they don't fall down. So
this definitely will.
Well, the base is pretty heavy. You'll be amazed at that base. That Rover is pretty heavy, actually. Or do they say what they use on top? Yeah, a real tablet is what they have on top. But the tablets aren't that heavy.
Kind of looks like your basic inverted pendulum, though. You know, you got this big weight on the end of the stick.
You hit the brakes and it goes.
Yeah, right. Ooh.
But in theory, it's relatively cheap. Well, I forget what he said price-wise, but yeah. And as I said, I actually have a Rover. And I don't know if I have a laptop. I probably do. So that's why I'm saying most of these parts I already have, I'm thinking. So anyway, those are the two, though, that you might want to look at. Because it sort of, goes either way, works. And that's about all I have for tonight.
Cool, thanks. Kit bashing.
Yeah, the one was using a Raspberry Pi Zero. I would be the one of choice for sure. So,
Righty. Well, I think it's certainly getting late here on the East Coast and a little bit late in the middle of the coast. So, guys, have a great evening. We'll catch you all on Saturday and look for a builder panel and some questions.
And it's at 1 o'clock?
1 o'clock Dallas time. Dave, you're muted.
That's okay. That was my question. 1 o'clock.
1 o'clock Dallas time, and whatever that is in New Zealand and wherever else. Okay, good. We'll catch you all then, guys. Have a good night.
Be well.
Good night, guys.
Night.